Do you know anyone that suffers from borderline personality disorder? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Results May Vary, the show where results, may vary. I'm your host, Sebastian, and today we'll be talking about borderline personality disorder. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, borderline personality disorder is a mental illness marked by an ongoing pattern of varying moods, self-image, and behavior. These symptoms often result in impulsive actions and problems in relationships. People with borderline personality disorder may experience intense episodes of anger, depression, and anxiety that can last from a few hours to days. People with borderline personality disorder may experience mood swings and display uncertainty about how they see themselves and their role in the world. As a result, their interests and values can change quickly. People with borderline personality disorder also tend to view things in extremes, such as all good or all bad. Opinions of other people can also change quickly. An individual who is seen as a friend one day may be considered an enemy or the traitor the next. These shifting feelings can lead to intense and unstable relationships, whether they be interpersonal or romantic relationships. People with borderline personality disorder may experience intense episodes of anger, depression, and anxiety that can last from a few hours to days. Other signs and symptoms may include efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment, such as rapidly initiating relationships, whether it be physical or emotional, or cutting off communication with someone in anticipation of being abandoned. A pattern of intense and unstable relationships with family, friends, and loved ones, often swinging from extreme closeness and love, something that's known as idealization, to extreme dislike or anger, which is also known as devaluation. So, in other words, either they jumped the gun or they jumped the gun. Distorted or unstable self-image or sense of self. I have had many friends who actually do suffer from borderline personality disorder, and this is a very common trait. They have a lot of issues with the way they see themselves, how others see them. A lot of them have had very key issues with low self-esteem, stemming from either childhood trauma with abuse. They have been victims of sexual abuse. They've been victims of bullying, shaming, body shaming, for example, as well. Distorted and unstable self-image or sense of self. Now, this is to not be confused with other types of mental disorders, such as body dysmorphia and the like. Usually it's more of a, I don't like the way I look, I am ugly, no one likes me, everybody thinks I'm horrible, I'm a monster, I'm worth nothing. That last statement about self-worth is key. Impulsive and often dangerous behaviors, such as spending sprees, unsafe sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, and binge eating. There's a very important detail I keep in mind in regards to these impulsive and dangerous behaviors. If these behaviors occur primarily during a period of elevated mood or energy, they may be a sign of a mood disorder, not necessarily borderline personality disorder. That's why I have previously spoken about being completely open and honest with your healthcare professional about what you were feeling at certain moments. They have to rule out the fact that maybe a mood or an energy level was caused by either drug use, you were under the influence of alcohol, maybe you had too much caffeine that day, stimulants, high energy, it's very important to tell a healthcare professional those details, especially when you're being interviewed, and that way they can get a proper focus on what diagnosis they're trying to get the criteria to fall into. Self-harming behavior such as cutting. Cutting is normally known as one of the most common types of self-harming behavior that's associated with borderline personality disorder. But that's not necessarily the case. Self-harm could also include punching walls, punching yourself. I've seen people bash their heads against windows. The words pretty much are self-explanatory. Self-harm. Now, another point is that sometimes the degree of self-harm can actually kind of vary. This is a very touchy subject because there are cutters that I personally know that you cannot see any type of injury on their arms because they either cut in areas that are out of sight. For example, ankles, the inner side of the thigh, maybe in the upper arm, so they're always wearing long sleeve shirts, sometimes maybe chest, but most of the time it's either arms, ankles, or legs. Usually it's accompanied by a very deep feeling of this emotional void where they're extremely ashamed and they don't want others to know that they cut. It's a very complicated subject. It's extremely touchy and extremely painful, but unfortunately, it is an important part of understanding borderline personality disorder. Intense and highly changeable moods, with each episode lasting from a few hours to a few days. Chronic feelings of emptiness. This is a very common occurrence which can actually lead to a lot of behaviors such as substance abuse, alcohol abuse, binge eating, also other types of coping mechanisms where they're trying to fill that void, that emptiness, with whatever behavior seems satisfactory or fulfilling at that time, whether it be sex, drugs, and other types of behavior that can just numb away that feeling, or at least give them some sense of peace. Inappropriate, intense anger or problems controlling anger. Anger management issues are a huge deal when it comes to people suffering from borderline personality disorder. Usually those anger issues can also stem from, once again, here are key words: childhood trauma, being exposed to conflicts, the difficulty trusting, which is sometimes accompanied by the irrational fear of other people's intentions. Now, let me clear this up. This isn't technically the same thing as paranoia, because paranoia is basically, at least in my opinion, what little research I've done, is a feeling that you're being persecuted. Someone who suffers from borderline personality disorder doesn't feel that you're after them, but if you do approach them, don't be surprised if they'll ask you, what do you want? What are you after? What do you want from me? Why? Because usually they come from backgrounds where that type of approach could lead to a toxic or abusive relationship. It's all part of the condition. This one's actually very interesting. It's very rare, but it is included under the criteria for diagnosing borderline personality disorder. And it's a feeling of disassociation, such as feeling cut off from oneself. It's a feeling of disconnect. Also, it can also be marked by seeing oneself from outside one's body, what normally would be known as an out-of-body experience. It's sort of like the equivalent of you're in a nightmare where you're about to see a car crash happen right in front of you, and you're outside of your body looking at it, and you're screaming and yelling and you're trying to make it stop, and there's nothing that can be done about it because nobody can hear you. It's that type of disconnect. There's also feelings of unreality, where there's some sort of disconnect from what the actual reality is. It's very important to note, not everyone with borderline personality disorder experiences every symptom. Now, that being said, some individuals experience only a few symptoms while others experience many more. Symptoms can be triggered by seemingly ordinary events. For example, someone that's suffering from borderline personality disorder might perceive a very simple disagreement or event, and they'll immediately become angry and distressed over a minor separation from a person to whom they feel close. The severity and frequency of symptoms and how long they last will vary depending on the individual and their illness. Borderline personality disorder often occurs with other mental illnesses. Co-occurring disorders can make it very difficult to diagnose and treat borderline personality disorder, especially if symptoms of other illnesses overlap with the symptoms of borderline personality disorder. For example, a person with BPD may be more likely to also experience symptoms of depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, substance use disorders, or eating disorders. Now, I know this because when I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, and during one of my revisions, I was speaking with my doctor, and while we were doing the family history, physical history of illness, and we were talking about my life experiences from when I was first diagnosed to current day, there were a lot of events that actually overlapped in the opposite direction. I was initially diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, and yet I have symptoms related to borderline personality disorder, such as the self-harm, the body image issues, how I see myself, how I see others, that certain feeling of mistrust. The whole reason why technically I couldn't be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder is because most of my episodes are of a depressive nature, and because of the length of which they last, technically they fall under bipolar 2 disorder. Psychotherapy is such an important part of treating mental illness, but especially borderline personality disorder. The reason why I say this is because normally when a doctor is evaluating your history, there are very key things that need to be taken into consideration in order to form a proper treatment plan, such as a family history. It could be a family history of mental illness, someone previously suffering from borderline personality disorder, generalized anxiety, depression, etc. Also, it is very important to describe any sort of childhood trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. If you come from some sort of family background where there's a lot of conflict involved, all of those details are key to properly diagnose borderline personality disorder, since most of the issues that arise, such as the feelings of mistrust, those quickly changing values in people, stem from that sort of behavior being exposed. It's very important for therapists to be able to establish some sort of connection and rapport with the patient. That way, you can properly start working on those issues of mistrust and abandonment. The rapport between a therapist and a patient is a sacred bond, especially for someone that's suffering from borderline personality disorder. Stemming from trust issues, it's very important to create that rapport and that overlapping feeling of, I can tell you what I need to tell you without any fear or shame. Now, once that's established, they could also add to that therapy a group session. That way, they can actually expose borderline personality disorder patients to other people so they can start to kind of interact and start learning new techniques to kind of promote that interaction and kind of curb that feeling of mistrust, that feeling of anxiety about being around other people, how to gauge those ideas of idealization and devaluation. It's also very important to note that it's also key in a group setting where everyone can work on anger management issues. That way, they have a safe space where they can properly communicate what they're feeling. They don't feel threatened. They don't feel judged. It's just a wonderful tool for many people, not only suffering from borderline personality disorder, but also from mental illness in general. Family therapy is also extremely important in treating borderline personality disorder. A lot of the symptoms that are triggered can pretty much stem from these conflicts in the nuclear family, where basically someone was exposed to an environment full of emotional and verbal abuse, therefore creating those issues of mistrust. In my research, I found two very important examples of psychotherapies that are used to treat borderline personality disorder. The first one is DBT, otherwise known as dialectical behavior therapy. Try saying that 3 times in a row. I can't. DBT is the type of therapy that was developed specifically for individuals suffering from borderline personality disorder. DBT uses concepts of mindfulness and awareness and the acceptance of being aware of and attentive to current situations and emotional states. DBT also teaches skills that can help with controlling intense emotions, reducing self-destructive behaviors, and improving relationships. I've always been a huge supporter of mindfulness techniques and also acceptance. It's very important that the first step that you take to treat any mental illness is the fact that you need to accept that you do have an illness and that it is treatable. Once you have acceptance down, you're so good to go. The second type of therapy is called cognitive behavioral therapy. Once again, try saying that 3 times in a row. You realize how many takes it took for me to actually get it right? Yeah. CBT is a type of therapy that can help with borderline personality disorder by identifying and changing core beliefs and behaviors that underlie the inaccurate perception of themselves and of others and problems interacting with others. CBT may also help reduce a range of mood and anxiety symptoms and reduce the number of suicidal or self-harming behaviors. Now, according to my technical advisor, the most used therapy right now to treat borderline personality disorder is DBT, using concepts from CBT. If you're watching this video and you suffer from borderline personality disorder, or you live with someone that suffers from borderline personality disorder, by all means, please share your story. I would be more than glad to listen. Please feel free to reach out. You can send me an email at takelifeasprescribed@gmail.com. You can also reach me on Instagram. You can send me a direct message, and I'll be more than glad to share your story. Keep in mind, all information that is given is strictly confidential. Nobody deserves to live with mental illness alone. There are plenty of people out there that are more than willing to help. I'm one of them. So if you want to reach out, by all means, feel free. You are not alone in this battle. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any comments or any stories you wish to share, please feel free to comment in the comment section down below. Also, please follow me on Instagram for a daily dose of motivation, and personal updates on future videos. Also, I share stories from time to time about dealing with my mental illness. I love to share my stories with all of you. Any stories you wish to share about your story with living with mental illness, by all means, please feel free to send me an email at takelifeasprescribed@gmail.com. The email address will also be provided in the description down below. Thank you so much once again for watching, and remember, please take life as prescribed with a grain of salt and plenty of wisdom. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys soon. I'm trying to shake the nerves, Gotta get this video going, Hey, what's up, folks?